Her career began near the end of the Mad Men era. Today, she is an undisputed leader in the business of building brands for her clients, her firm, and inadvertently for herself. Shelly Lazarus, chair of Ogilvy and Mather, is this week's leader on leadership.
Knowing when to ask for help is critical when you're in a leadership position.
It's getting the best out of people. It's the essence of leadership.
Major funding for Leaders on Leadership is provided by Greenleaf Trust.
Helping people manage their wealth, accumulate assets, and preserve those assets for generational continuity implies trust. We are sitting down on the same side of the desk as you are. We're planning for your financial needs.
Additional funding provided by the Wayne State University School of Business Administration.
Welcome to Leaders on Leadership, here with a student audience on campus at the Wayne State University and Detroit Public Television Midtown Detroit studio. I'm Larry Fobes. Shelly Lazarus often talks about the importance of finding the job you love. She's done that, but it wasn't a direct path in the early days. Thanks for being here, Shelly.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
You went off and did your undergraduate work at Smith.
I did.
A very high caliber all-women's school. Mm-hmm. How did that environment help prepare you, aim you towards a C-suite job?
Well, the thing that was remarkable about Smith, and it was a remarkable place at the time, was that it was all women, and yet they were the most capable group of people that I had ever met. They happened to be women, and there was nothing that these women couldn't do. So later on, when I went into the business world and anybody would say to me, this is something a woman can't do, I knew it was preposterous because the women I had gone to school with, they could do anything. And so it gave me this great self-confidence.
Now, then after Smith, you went to Columbia and did an MBA.
I did.
And when you gave a commencement address at Smith a couple of years ago, you talked about a fairly unusual reason for going for an MBA.
Well, I'm probably the only person in the history of the world who went to get an MBA because I didn't want to type. And it was true, because when I got out of college in the early 70s, it was the only way that a woman could enter the commercial world would be through typing. Now, you could pick where you wanted to type. I mean, you could type in a law firm, you could type in a bank, you could type in an advertising agency, but you were going to type, and that idea was so disturbing to me, distressing to me, that somebody actually who I was interviewing with said, well, you know, I bet if you got an MBA, they couldn't make you type. And it was a hypothesis. It was not a sure thing. And of course, I didn't know what an MBA was. So I had to go research what an MBA was, and lo and behold, and the reason I was doing all this was that I was in love, I wanted to get married, and the person I was in love with, who's now has been my husband of 41 years, was in medical school, so somebody had to get a job. And he was in medical school in New York at Columbia, and lo and behold, I discovered that Columbia had a graduate school of business. And even more importantly, you could go through in 15 months. They had sort of 4 semesters that ran straight through. So I thought, perfect. I started 4 days after I graduated from Smith. I entered a school where I went from an all-women's college to a school where I was one of 4 women in a class of 300. So it was quite a remarkable experience. And then I just loved it. It was all really terrific, but it was all a big accident.
Okay. Then after graduation, after the accidental MBA,
Mm-hmm.
You did a turn at Clairol as a product manager.
Yes.
And then joined Ogilvy.
Right.
Took a little break when you went with your husband while he did military service, then back to Ogilvy. and you've been there your whole career.
Correct.
What was the attraction to Ogilvy and Mather, and how did you get there?
Well, it was, I actually couldn't go straight through for 4 semesters at Columbia. I mean, after 3 semesters, I had to take a break. And so I was an intern at General Foods, which is now Kraft. And I worked in the Maxwell House division, and Ogilvy was the agency. And so I got to know them as a client, and they were the agency, and I just thought they were spectacular. I just loved these people. They were funny and creative, and they lived in New York, and it was just, I just had a wonderful experience with them. I went to Clairol, and about 2 years in at Clairol, I got a call from a headhunter who said that Ogilvy was looking for somebody who had hair experience. Well, so they went to Clairol, there I was. And I thought, oh, well, I love Clairol. I'm never going to go to Ogilvy, but those people were so great. I haven't seen them in 2 years. I'll just go over and kind of say hi to them. And I got seduced, of course, to come there. I never had any intention of staying more than 2 years. I thought I'll do the clients. I did the client side, I'll do the agency side, and then I'll go off and do something else. And I just found a place where I was so happy that I never thought about leaving again.
Now, in the early days, as you said, you were one of the few women executives in advertising in those days. I saw an interview by the founder of the firm, David Ogilvy, on the old David Susskind show, and he talked about using the fact that he was Scottish to his advantage as being the only Scotsman in New York advertising business. Right. Were you able to use your underrepresented gender as an advantage?
Oh, it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, because invariably what we were doing advertising for, the products that we were doing advertising for, were targeted to women. And I used to be the only woman in the room. And somewhere, I'd say within an hour of the conversation, there would always come a moment, as we had presented all the advertising and people were assessing it, and someone would turn to me and go, well, Shelly, what do women think? And so for years, I was talking on behalf of all women in the world, actually, just because, and at the beginning, it sort of bothered me because, this was my own opinion, but I thought, actually, I was probably closer to all women in the world than all those men were, so it was okay.
Before we talk about your leadership experiences at Ogilvy, tell us what the company is, what it does.
Well, it's actually, that sounds like a very easy question, but it's become a really hard question. Because when David Ogilvy founded the agency 60 plus years ago, it was an advertising agency, and it made advertising. And so that was a clear thing. But as time went on, the meaning of advertising sort of got larger and larger. So now we do all kinds of communications. We do direct marketing. We do internet, public relations, government relations. It's just every aspect of communications.
Okay. Now, you lead from a really interesting crossroad. You work with the people, you lead the people inside the agency who are creative, innovative, kind of that side of the demographic, when you work with the corporate types and your clients to help them do the brand. Do you change your leadership approach in two different worlds, or do leaders need to be who they are?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I mean, I always think that a very important part of my role is kind of helping to translate between them. So that I can talk to CEOs and they'll tell me exactly what they need the communications to do, what they want the brand to be, and I sort of then translate that into more creative, friendly kind of directives, and then going back the other way, I try to take what the creative people have created to those business needs, and present them back to the client in more of a strategic frame, so that it makes more sense.
Interesting.
It's fascinating, actually. There have been some exciting moments, actually, going back and forth.
Now, you came to the New York office, I think in the early 90s, and you became head of the New York office at a stressful time for the company.
Very.
WPP had just taken the company over by hostile buyout.
Right.
Employees were bailing, clients were running. When you take over the lead in that kind of environment, how do you decide what to do first, what to do, and then what to do first?
Well, first of all, I used to have this recurring nightmare, which was really frightening because it could have been true. I used to have the nightmare that I came into the office one morning and there was nobody there. All the people had left and all the clients had left, and I was the only person there. You know that old joke of, just shut out the lights. But that never happened. What the real advantage I had was that I had been in the New York office of Ogilvy, and one of the great surprises to me was when I went to meet the senior leadership of the agency that first day, was they were all the people who had been there before. I knew all those people who were in that room. They just looked a little contorted, as if they had been through some misery. But I knew them, and I knew they were more than capable of turning around this office.
One of the things that happened in this time frame is a major client, American Express, left.
Mm-hmm. Among others.
Among others.
Among others, right.
You've talked about how bad you felt about that, and you spent the next days wondering the impact on the bottom line. Mm-hmm. But the founder, David Ogilvy, was more worried about how you were seeing it. Mm-hmm. Tell us that story.
Yeah, well, it's David Ogilvy, just by chance. I don't know how these things happen. He was only in New York at that time about 3 weeks a year because he had retired to France. He was sitting in my office on the Friday afternoon when the phone call came from American Express that we were being fired. After years of doing wonderful work for them and a wonderful relationship. And so then David called me on Saturday at home and said, "How are you?" And I did my very, polished, thoughtful, analytical assessment of where we were as a company and what the economic impact was and what we were going to do with the people who had been working on American Express because they were great people. And he listened very politely. There was not one sound from the other end of the line for 10 minutes as I did my presentation on the phone. And at the end he said, "Actually, I don't care about any of that." He said, "I just called to find out how you are." And he said, and I've never forgotten this, he said, "Because if you're discouraged, if you're despondent, if you feel 1 ounce less committed to this agency, to this company, then we're a weakened company. But if you're fine," he said, "then we're fine. Because American Express, they'll come back or they won't. Somebody else will come. Other clients will come in. You don't have to worry about it. But if the people within the company are strong and are believers and are committed, then we're just fine." And I have given that same speech to other people at least 15 times over the course of my CEO-ship, as I've talked to people about losing business.
You had some other changes happen during your CEO-ship, some that you caused. You took the silos of each of the different divisions, merged them in together into an integrated approach. Why not let the subject matter experts optimize the results for each individual client?
Well, that's the great argument, isn't it? Is which approach to take, and I did it with knowledge of subject matter expertise being important, because I've never known a client who's going to trade off expertise for integration. You've got to be as good a public relations company as there are public relations companies. You've got to be as good an advertising agency as there are advertising agencies. So you have to be superb in each one of the disciplines. But what a client really needs is an integrated solution. He doesn't need an integrated company. So the question is, how do you keep the domain expertise? How do you keep the best people in each discipline, but insist that they work together, that they think together to bring a client an integrated solution? And so that was the challenge of it. And you just kind of, you get the best people, and then you pose the problem in the right way. You get them comfortable enough with each other that they can think together. And then with a lot of oversight, you can get an integrated solution for a client.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll talk about her personal leadership style with Shelly Lazarus, chair of Ogilvy and Mather. Welcome back to Leaders on Leadership. Joining us today is Shelly Lazarus, and we're talking about her personal leadership style and company leadership insights from the company founder. There's a quote that you often use from David Ogilvy, and he talks about people being the most important part of the company, and it's what CEOs should focus on. How does that play out in your leadership style?
Well, I'm one of those servant leaders, I guess is what they call the style. It's where I am grateful every day for the people who are around me and work with me. And I never, with all the emphasis and focus on CEOs, I mean, I think the truth is that no one ever can run a company on their own, that they have to have superb people around them, and they have to respect those people, take care of them, nurture them, give them whatever they need to get them to continue to stay as part of your team. And I think that really was why David was as successful as he was in building the agency, because he focused on individuals. It wasn't people in general. It's individuals.
The difference being?
Being that it's one person at a time. You know, that you have to make sure that each person is thriving, is happy, is being challenged, is in an environment where he can be as successful as he can possibly be, or she. And this is when you focus that way, people stay. So one of the real differences about Ogilvy in the advertising industry is it's an industry where people tend to leave every 2 to 3 years. People never stay at agencies, is what people think. But at Ogilvy, we have people who 10 years is a very short time. I mean, we have people who've been with us 20, 30, 40 years. And it's just an environment and a culture that people like, and then they stay.
But the focus of a chair or CEO on people, that's kind of different from the movie version of CEOs where they're focused only on big vision, big picture. Do CEOs have to do both?
I think they definitely have to do both, because first of all, people aren't going to stay if they don't know where the enterprise is going. So you've got to have a vision, you have to have a strategy, because people don't want to be in a ship that has no direction. So they're sort of related. But then once everyone agrees that this is where we're going, this is the strategy, then, you know, I would say you have to keep all the bunnies in the box, you know, because people, their attention strays. And part of the role of the CEO is to make sure that you find the most talented people, you attract them, you keep them focused, you keep them happy, you keep them thriving, and then you can, as a group, as a leadership team, take on anything.
Now, as chair CEO, you're often referred to as someone who has a corporate warrior style leavened with a large dose of charm, which is a nice combination. I like it. Now, can CEOs, chairs, or any leader, can they create almost a false front, a false style of leadership, or does the real person always come through?
No, I actually think the only thing that's required, that I would say is absolutely required in any leader, is authenticity. If you're not who you are, you're going to be found out in about a nanosecond. People can smell it. And I think one of the reasons that you have so many different kinds of leaders across so many organizations is they're authentic to who they are, but they're all different. So there's no one right way. The only thing that's right is that you're true to yourself.
One thing in your business, it's a demanding business, and people often assume that the workday is 24/7.
Yeah.
You've gone a completely different path, working hard to balance personal and professional lives. As you're coming up through the ranks as a young leader, how do you do that and compete with the people who are playing the 24/7 game?
Well, I always like to focus on outcomes, not on hours. And so I've always said to the people with whom I work, clients, other people in the agency, tell me what you need. I will deliver that. Don't worry about when I'm working and how I'm getting there, because I may want to just be with my kids on Saturday afternoon and not look at my BlackBerry, and that's what I'm going to do. But judge me by whether I deliver what you need, of the quality that you need it, and in the time that we've agreed.
You've also defined successful careers a little bit differently. You take your own path a lot. I like that. In the old days, a successful career was characterized as someone who had it all. Now, you've turned that around to where a successful career is people having only the things they really want to do and not having things they hate to do. How does that work? So
it's one of the things that has become obvious to me is that you can fit into your life everything you love to do. You just figure out how to do it. It's part of human nature. What you can fit in, what you hate fitting in, is things that you find boring, tedious, frustrating. And so the game is to get rid of all that stuff because it's probably not that important anyway. And to just sort of fill your life with things that are important to you. But you have to be vigilant. You have to keep thinking about what is it that's important to me, and do I really need to make a dinner party tonight? Not really. It's not that important.
One thing that is important, and you keep advising students about, is that they need to not sell themselves out to the company or to the boss. They need to be true to their own values and not. If you're a rising star heading for C-suite, that's probably easier than if you're a regular employer. Is there a risk for people when they do that?
Well, I think you have to assess what the risk is. I mean, the biggest risk to me is always, what's the worst thing that could happen? They'll fire you. But that's really not such a terrible thing if you stand up for what you believe in. And so you got to just keep thinking about what are the consequences. And if the worst thing that's going to happen is that they're going to fire you, and they're not going to fire you, because if you're talented and capable, no one's going to fire you, because you don't go to a meeting or something like that because something else is more important. But you just have to have the confidence to stare them in the eye and say, this is what I'm doing today. If you don't like it, too bad. It's worked for me.
It has worked well. You've said that leaders are inherently generous and they're inherently confident.
And optimistic.
And optimistic.
Right. Yep.
How does that work in the way you do business?
Well, I think that, so let's start with the optimistic part. Is, in my view, if you don't believe that you're going to achieve what you set out to achieve, or if you don't believe that you can actually meet the goal or be successful in the mission, why would anybody follow you? It's just if you don't even believe it. So I think it's really important to make some assessment yourself of what you think is possible and to be honest about it. And then you have to exude some confidence about it. Saying it's one thing, being confident about it is something else, because as I like to say to sort of young leaders, people are looking at you all the time. They want to see if you really believe, if you really think we can get there. And then generosity is just a human thing to me. It's the most successful leaders I know share the problem with others. They share the success with others. They share the fun with others. They're just inherently generous. And that's how you build a successful team.
Shelly, I've got one last question for you. Let's assume you wake up tomorrow morning in a completely different set of circumstances. You're not a C-suite officer. You're a business person of modest means. You're starting a new one location retail shop downtown Manhattan, selling whimsical figurines, maybe frogs. How you go, and you don't have obviously the capital to go hire an Ogilvy. How do you go about building a brand for this startup company?
Well, that's a fabulous question, because actually I'm asked that all the time in different guises. It's just you start out with a set of beliefs and principles and values. You have to decide, what is it that you stand for? What does this shop stand for? What does it add that was not in someone's life before? And if it disappeared, what would be missing? So that you know what your unique place sort of is, on the firmament, in the firmament. And then you have to have a point of view about how are you going to present that. Are you serious? Are you whimsical? Are you bringing fun? Are you bringing beauty? Are you bringing house gifts? Are you bringing things that interior designers can use? And then the most important thing of all is, whatever it is you decide, you must stay true to it in everything. Every point of contact communicates the brand. So what the windows look like, what the name is, what the bags are like that you're going to put the little objects in, what the shelves look like, what the lighting looks like, who you hire as your first employee, where you are, how you answer the telephone, what the online page looks like, the website. Everything has to be consistent with what your own view is, your image is of the brand.
Just like the corporate life.
Exactly.
Thanks for being here, Shelly.
My pleasure.
Please join us again next time for another edition of Leaders on Leadership. See you then.
Major funding for Leaders on Leadership is provided by Greenleaf Trust.
Helping people manage their wealth, accumulate assets, and preserve those assets for generational continuity implies trust. We are sitting down on the same side of the desk as you are. We're planning for your financial needs.
Additional funding provided by the Wayne State University School of Business Administration. An encore presentation of Leaders on Leadership is available online for viewing at dptv.org.